All right, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into application-specific blockchains, app chains.
Right, app chains.
We've got this scale documentation, and our mission really is to understand what they are, why building one traditionally is, well, really hard,
Yeah, super challenged.
and how a network like Scale tries to, change that whole picture,
No,
using this documentation as our guide, of course.
absolutely. And if you've like considered launching your own chain for a specific dApp,
Hmm.
the kind of complexity we're talking about, it hits you right away, even before coding the app itself.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
desire for a tailored chain, maybe for performance or costs or just specific features, it's common.
Totally common, but actually doing it outside an ecosystem built for it,
Hmm.
that means tackling some really fundamental infrastructure problems.
Problems most developers aren't really set up to handle, right?
Precisely.
So what are those big, thorny problems the sources point out? If you're going it alone, the old-fashioned way, what stops people?
Well, the documentation lays out 4 key ones. First up is designing the whole economic system.
The money part.
Exactly. How do you create like a token model or fees that actually incentivize validators, the people running the nodes, securing your chain
The crucial folks.
to join your chain specifically and, stick around?
Right. Okay. So you need an economy built from scratch just to get the operators on board.
You got it. And that flows right into the second challenge,
Mm-hmm.
actually recruiting those validators.
Trusting them.
Yeah, finding enough reliable, trustworthy people willing to commit resources to a brand new single app chain. It's a huge job. Kind of a chicken and egg thing, too.
Okay. So build an economy, then go find the validators. Makes sense. What's hurdle number 3?
So while you're juggling the economics and the recruitment, you're also fighting against those classic blockchain trade-offs.
Ah, the trilemma stuff.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
You need decentralization for security, right? You need speed for the users. You need stability. Trying to balance the money and the people while also hitting that sweet spot between decentralization, speed, and stability, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, tweak one thing, you might mess up another. Get it super decentralized, maybe it slows down. Aim for speed, maybe security suffers.
Exactly. Finding what works for your app while building the whole system, it sounds pretty intense.
Intense is one word for it. And the fourth big one.
Number 4 is handling the decentralized security itself. How do you actually make sure the chain is secure, immutable, protect against attacks? Rely on this distributed network.
All without a central control point.
Right. That takes some serious expertise. Cryptography, consensus mechanisms, network security. It's deep stuff.
Wow. Okay, so just those 4.
Yeah.
Economy design, validator recruitment, the balancing act, decentralized security. That's a mountain to climb before you even get to your app's unique features.
It really is.
And this is where the Scale documentation suggests a different approach. How does it claim to, sidestep these issues?
That's the core idea, basically. SKALE aims to abstract all that infrastructure stuff away from the developer.
Okay.
So instead of you having to design the economy and hunt down validators for your specific chain,
Right.
SKALE uses what they call a pooled security model. There are already these big validator supernodes in the SKALE network staked with a lot of resources.
Interesting. So the dev isn't paying validators for just their chain.
Correct. The security, the validation that's shared across the whole network of SKALE chains, and the actual process of spinning up a new app chain, assigning those validators, managing it,
How does that work?
that's handled by smart contracts called the SKALE Manager running on the Ethereum Mainnet.
Okay. Using Ethereum for the, master control layer.
Exactly. For the orchestration.
So by having the pooled validators and the Scale Manager on Ethereum, Scale essentially takes care of those first 4 headaches you listed.
That's the claim. The validator economics, recruitment, the balancing, the security mechanism, it's all part of the network layer you plug into. The developer can then just, focus on their dApp, not on building a whole blockchain from the ground up.
Right. They can create their app chain relatively quickly, the docs say, and just trust the network underneath.
That's the value proposition.
That definitely sounds simpler. But okay, once you have a Scale app chain running, what are the big advantages the sources highlight? What does this specific setup enable?
One key thing is customization. That's what they call it. It's not like deploying to a shared chain where everything's standard. SKALE chains let devs really tweak things. Chain settings, how tokens move not just to Ethereum, but between other SKALE chains too. Even specific governance or permissions for your chain.
So tailored, optimized for the job it's doing.
Exactly. Makes each one potentially unique.
That makes sense for getting the best performance. The documentation also talks a lot about built-in interoperability.
Yes, and it's kind of a two-stage thing based on their history. From day one, SKALE chains could talk to the Ethereum Mainnet, L1.
Okay, so easy movement of tokens, messages, back and forth with Ethereum.
Right, so you're not stuck on your own island. Yeah. You can still leverage Ethereum's ecosystem, its liquidity, users.
Got it. Tapping into the big network.
Precisely. And then they had a big upgrade, SKALE v2, June 2022,
Okay.
which added default native interoperability between the SKALE chains themselves.
Oh, okay. Why is that a big deal? What does connecting the app chains unlock?
This is where it gets really neat, actually. It enables a kind of network effect within SKALE.
How so?
Because different app chains can easily communicate, you can have specialized chains pop up that act as hubs. Think like a dedicated app chain just for a DEX, or one for liquidity, or an NFT marketplace. So your app chain can then just interact directly with those hub chains inside the SKALE network. You don't have to build your own DEX or go all the way back to L1 for everything.
Right, so you leverage specialized services running on other dedicated chains within the same network. That sounds efficient.
Very. It allows for a more modular kind of ecosystem building.
Okay, fascinating. Now, this next point feels like it tackles, well, maybe the biggest headache in blockchain right now: resource competition.
Yeah, this is pretty fundamental to their whole model based on the sources.
Right.
On typical monolithic chains, yeah, everyone shares the same resources.
Right, thousands of apps fighting for space.
And when things get busy, usage spikes, the network gets clogged, and you get those bidding wars for transactions, leading to insane, unpredictable gas fees.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there. Trying to do something simple and the gas cost is just, wow.
Exactly. SKALE, because it uses these dedicated app chains, it's a horizontal scaling approach. It aims to entirely remove that competition.
Because your dApp has its own dedicated lane, essentially.
Precisely. Your app's performance, its cost, it's completely isolated from whatever chaos might be happening on some other app chain in the network.
And is that where the zero gas fees come in? The docs mention that explicitly.
Yes, the sources are clear. Zero gas fees for the end user. The architecture enables it, but the core principle is key. Two different app chains on SKALE will never compete for block space. Never. Your app gets its own resources, leading to predictable performance.
Predictable performance and zero gas fees. That's a pretty radical shift for users and devs.
This is a major selling point.
And that connects directly to scalability, I imagine. If you're not fighting for resources, you can just grow bigger.
That's the idea. Horizontal scaling.
Yeah.
The docs say developers can build fearlessly without worrying about hitting some global capacity limit or seeing their app slow down just because it got popular.
So what happens if your app gets really popular and even outgrows its own dedicated chain?
Well, the sources say you can just provision another app chain or, quote, as many more as they needed, all dedicated to that same application.
Okay, so you can add more horsepower by adding more chains, but how do you connect them if one app is running across multiple chains?
They mention a tool called the SKALE Interchain Message Agent, IMA. That facilitates the communication between your multiple dedicated chains, so they can work together like a single, larger, scalable system.
So truly, as they say, there is always room to scale.
Yeah. Seems the name wasn't accidental. It suggests, potentially limitless capacity by just adding more dedicated blocks.
Okay. Lastly, the sources highlight something specific: the enterprise advantage. How does this app chain model benefit businesses in particular?
Right. For businesses, a big plus is being able to create either permissioned or permissionless chains, tailored very specifically to what they need operationally or for security.
Things public chains might not offer easily.
Exactly. Businesses often need really tight controls, specific permissions, high data security. The docs give examples like supply chain or CRM systems where you need that granular control.
So a company could build a private or semi-private blockchain that works exactly the way their business works instead of bending to fit a public chain.
That's the idea. And remember the customization. They can optimize chain parameters for their specific use case, maybe prioritize certain transaction types or data throughput.
Potentially getting better performance than a generic setup.
Potentially, yes. And critically for enterprise,
Yeah.
predictability, especially under load. Since each enterprise app chain is dedicated,
Right.
heavy traffic on one system or even heavy traffic on a completely different company's app chain on SKALE, it won't impact their app's performance.
Yeah, that consistent, predictable performance is usually non-negotiable for businesses.
It really is. It tackles a major hesitation point for enterprises looking at blockchain, but worried about the volatility or shared resource problems of other platforms.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up then. Based purely on the scale documentation we looked at, the core pitch for their app chains seems to be about making dedicated blockchains way easier to create,
Simplifying the creation, yeah.
while offering some powerful advantages once they're running, like taking away those huge infrastructure hurdles up front, allowing deep customization, making sure chains can talk to each other and Ethereum easily,
Interoperability, right?
completely getting rid of resource competition, which leads to the zero gas fees and predictable performance,
That's crucial points.
and this inherent scalability where apps can just grow onto more chains. It sounds like these features, especially the control and predictability, could be really appealing for businesses.
That sums up the key points from the sources pretty well. It's essentially app chains delivered as a service, letting developers focus on the app, not the underlying blockchain tech.
So here's something to chew on, maybe for you listening. Given this model, this ability to relatively easily spin up dedicated, custom, interconnected blockchains, how could that change things? For those high-demand dApps struggling on shared chains now, or even for traditional businesses that found blockchain too complex or unpredictable before, what totally new kinds of applications might actually become practical with this kind of setup? Something to think about.